Good afternoon and welcome to this EPC online policy dialogue entitled Towards a Secure, Affordable and Secure Energy Future and Sustainable and Clean Energy Future. How can digitalization help? Which has been kindly supported by the Vodafone Institute for Society and Communications. So my name is Simon Dekeyrel. I'm policy analyst for climate and energy at the Sustainable Prosperity for Europe program of the EPC. And I will be moderating today's discussion. So we at EPC have been working on for several years on the topic of how digitalization can function as an enabler of the green transition. In the past, we have focused on various topics, such as, for instance, how digitalization can help to green mobility, how digitalization can improve biodiversity, and especially how digitalization can help make our economy more circular, how it can help enable circular economy. So as last year's project in this series of projects on digitalization and the green energy transition focused maybe on the most timely of all sectors or topics, which is energy systems. So as everybody will know, as the Russian invasion has shown, the EU's reliance on imported fossil fuels is not just environmentally unsustainable, but is also a major threat to European prosperity and security. As such, the EU needs to urgently accelerate the transition towards renewable, towards sustainable energy systems. And in doing so, digitalization can be of significant help. It can help improve system integration. It can enable peer-to-peer electricity trading. It can make our homes more energy efficient. It can help to decarbonize our industry. But at the same time, of course, certain risks, and there are also certain risks and challenges with the digitalization of our energy system, such as, for instance, the energy use by digital technologies, cybersecurity risks, also concerns over privacy and data protection that households may have. So to realize the full potential of digitalization in the clean energy transition, the EU needs a coherent policy framework, as has been clearly recognized also by the European Commission through its recent action plan on digitalizing the energy system, which was released in October of last year. So this, which proposes, for instance, the establishment of a common EU energy data space, and also various other measures to digitalize the electricity grid to ensure benefits of this twin green and digital transition of our energy systems for consumers, and also measures to address cybersecurity risks. And so, as part of this EPC project on digitalization and the clean energy transition, which was organized last year in collaboration with the Vodafone Institute for Society and Communications, 2 online workshops were organized in May and July of last year, which focused respectively on how digitalization can help to facilitate the integration of renewables into the electricity grid, and also how digitalization can help to improve energy efficiency and energy savings in buildings, in homes, in industry, how it can help to reduce, to make our transport more energy efficient. And so the findings of these 2 online workshops served as a discussion paper, which is now also available on our website, and which should be linked in the Zoom chat by my colleague who has co-authored this paper with me, which discusses the potential of digital solutions in the clean energy transition, and also analyzes the action plan of the Commission, and also formulates certain policy recommendations, how we can really unlock the full potential of digitalization in the transition towards sustainable energy systems. And so these are also the topics that we aim to discuss today. And joining us for today's discussion, we have 3 speakers. First, Paula Pinho, Director for Just Transition, Consumers, Energy Efficiency and Innovation at DG Energy, of the European Commission. Ben Wreschner, Chief Economist and Head of Public Affairs at the Vodafone Group, and Francisco Boshell, Head of Innovation and End-Use Applications at the International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA. So first, we will have introductory remarks from each of the speakers, and after that, the floor will be open for questions from the audience. You can raise your hand in Zoom to make a verbal intervention, or you can also just write your questions in the Zoom chat, and I can bring them to the speakers. Maybe before we start, there will also be another link normally provided in the Zoom chat to a survey, as this event is organized under the EU SURF program, which we would also kindly request you to fill out during the event or after the event, which has been shared now. So then, without much further ado, I would first like to give the word to Paula Pinho, who will present the EU's action plan of the European Commission on digitalizing the energy system. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you to the EPC for organizing this timely event. Pleasure to be here also with Ben and Francisco. So we were already in a path of a journey on energy transition, and an intense journey. With the events over the past year, the rise in energy prices as we had never seen before, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we understood that we really need to accelerate the energy transition and to reduce our energy dependence, invest in the deployment of sustainable, of energy efficient and carbon neutral solutions. Now, how are we going to do that? All the plans that we had put forward, the proposals for legislation, the so-called Fit for 55 legislative proposals, and then the Repower EU, which is meant to accelerate this transition, can simply not be achieved without an energy system that is much smarter and much more interactive than it is the case today. This implies a real change to the way in which we produce energy, the way we consume energy, but also the way the use we make of infrastructure. To illustrate this, take the way we produce energy. Thanks to digitalization, we are now in a position to decentralize the production of electricity, meaning that it's not one company, one supplier making it all. I am in a position to produce my own energy and even to feed it into the grid. It is also about the way we consume energy. I want to be able as a consumer to make the best use of demand response. That means to be able to activate my washing machine when there is most electricity in the grid, and not only when I get home in the evening. Smart appliances, which are used both at domestic but also at industry and business level, can bring this crucial change in managing our consumption, and therefore in managing our bills and in preserving our networks secure. Through the digital tools, consumers can see in real time the sources of energy and the times of the day when energy is less expensive. If there's too much electricity in the grid, they can decide to use such clean energy to charge their electric vehicles, for instance. We don't have sun for the moment in Brussels, but we have plenty of wind. So maybe this is a good time to do it if I have the digital means to actually activate this. This information on the energy use can help me as a consumer make informed choices on the when and the how to consume, hence on taking control, no longer being a passive consumer of energy, but really being an active player in the energy system. utilizing flexibility on the energy supplied and demand side through digitalization is really becoming increasingly important for the energy system to both, on the one hand, limit prices, but also emissions. And we've calculated that the direct benefits of such flexibility could lead to a potential cost reduction for consumers of more than 71 billion euro per year on electric consumption, which is huge. At the same time, it could allow us to save 37.5 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. So really a no-brainer. And all of this coming at a time when, as we all know, energy savings are more than welcome and where we're all looking for efficient energy savings. I said it's also about the way we use infrastructure. And here we're talking about managing the network, a network which then relies on access to data and exchange of that data and digital technologies. The digital energy infrastructure can really contribute to important savings in energy consumption. So as said, we will be digitalizing the energy system on the one hand to green the energy grid and at the same time to generate savings for consumers. So in order to accelerate and steer the direction of this twin digital and green transformation, we have put forward, the Commission put forward last year, as Simon said, an action plan on the digitalization of the energy system. And it's really about covering the whole system, the whole energy system, from production to distribution to consumption, and see what are the digital means and measures that need to be put into place in order to enable this digital transition. The objective is to have a better functioning, smart, integrated and interconnected energy system, where also new business models can emerge in a market which is changing very, very fast. And so if I go through the main pillars of this action plan, first, it's about data sharing. Sharing data across the energy value chain and strengthening the interoperability to link this data with other sectors and systems will contribute to the creation of innovative services and to unlock private investments that in turn can support this twin transition. So what we're trying to do at EU level, well, let me say what we're doing at EU level is to support data exchange in the energy sector as a matter of high priority and based on the principles of the data space policy and the Data Act. So that's one pillar. Second, investments. Nothing will happen if we do not foster the necessary investments in smarter and more digitalized systems. The decentralization of energy generation, the connection of millions of smart appliances, heat pumps, electric cars, all of this transforms the last meters in the distribution grids into the first. And therefore, operators need to invest in the respective monitoring and control capabilities. Smarter grids are really the backbone of the digitalization of the energy system, and hence the need for increased investments in data exchange between TSOs and DSOs, efficient infrastructure and network planning. All of this is key to accelerate the development and upscaling of digital solutions across the entire energy value chain. Third pillar, citizens are at the core of this twin transition. We may have the data, the investments, the legislation in place, but if citizens do not embrace and make this transition theirs, it will never happen. Hence the need to empower the citizens to participate in this twin transition. And the benefits are absolutely clear. I'm thinking, for instance, in Estonia, consumers can download a smart energy app where they receive the electricity price data. And what is more, they can set it up to charge the electric vehicle when the price is lowest. And this allows them to save up to 30% of their energy costs on average. So clear, tangible benefits which can bring the consumer along. Now, in doing so, we must be cautious not to leave behind those citizens who are more socially disadvantaged, and make sure that the digitalization does not cause exclusion or become a motive of discrimination. So as a result, we really need to pay special attention to the issues of energy poverty and digital divide. So part of the challenges to address. And speaking about challenges, fourth pillar is really about the challenges, because we should be conscious that along with the opportunities that digitalization brings, it also brings challenges, for instance, in terms of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is an absolute key requirement for the energy system to remain secure and to resist possible attacks. And it's clear that the possible attack surface of a given system increases as it transitions from being centralized to being more and more decentralized. So we are well conscious of this and are addressing it in any action that we want to take to encourage and accompany this transition. Fifth, and I think this is also can also be brought under the headline of the challenge, is the fact that ICT is an energy intensive sector. Therefore, we must tackle the growing energy consumption and environmental impact of ICT systems. As I like to bring in the comparison, actually the carbon emissions of the ICT sector nowadays are at the same level with the ones of the aviation industry. The difference being that they are growing at a much faster pace. So data centers, communication networks, but also the energy which is needed to manufacture the electronic devices that we use on a day-to-day basis are the main sources of energy of these emissions, and we need to tackle these. And that's why we have, for instance, with regard to the energy consumption of consumer devices, we have eco-design requirements for a large number of these products. We are also working on an energy labeling scheme for electronic displays and also for computers. At the same time, we are addressing the energy consumption of data centers and even of cryptocurrencies, which are becoming more and more important consumers of electricity. And I'm reassured to see that there are already pilot projects which show that there is a huge potential, and it is actually possible to significantly, well, I'd say even drastically reduce the consumption of data centers. I'm thinking of a project in Sweden, for instance, where this has been achieved. So to conclude, it is absolutely clear that digitalization not only enables, but will actually accelerate the uptake of key technologies for the clean energy and climate transition, that data access, data sharing are the basis of many of the added value services that come with it, that we need to find new ways to address the rising emissions from the ICT and the digital sector in general. But in the end, that really it can bring huge efficiencies and enable big energy savings, which we all need now more than ever, as we know. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Paula for setting the scene and also for giving such a comprehensive overview of the action plan. I would encourage everyone who has already questions regarding this presentation to already post them in the Zoom chat if you want, and they can then be later brought up. So then our second speaker is Ben Wreschner, who is Chief Economist and Head of Public Affairs at the Vodafone Group, and who will provide us now with a business perspective on this topic.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, EPC, for hosting this event. It's somewhat daunting to go after Paula, who's given such a comprehensive and fascinating insight into the action plan and associated opportunities and challenges. But I will do my best. But let me start by just maybe a personal sort of anecdote. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was probably 6 months ago that I was asked to head up a sort of a short-term project within Vodafone, looking at the impact of the war in Ukraine and the impact that has on energy, and how that might affect our business, both in terms of security of supply, which is an issue that we need to ensure that our networks, which run on electricity, have electricity at all times. Otherwise, our customers will get very disappointed. And the second is around the pricing, and specifically what governments might be doing to change the electricity market and intervene in pricing. But in taking this short-term project, which I now realise short-term means it's going to run for many, many years, given the energy challenges we have. It's opened up a world to me, which is absolutely fascinating in terms of how the digital transition and the energy transition and the green transition all go hand in hand, and effectively absolutely linked, and all need to go at the same pace in order to achieve what European citizens need. And so often panels where you have industry talking after institution, there's some tension, there's some disagreement. There's not a lot of disagreement you're going to hear from me today. I just want to more build on what Paula said, but also bring in a few perspectives from what we're doing as a company. And one of the first things I'd just like to respond to is what Paula said about the level of energy consumption of the ICT industry as a whole. And for us as a company, this is a huge challenge for us. It won't be a surprise to anyone that the amount of data our customers are consuming is growing at a huge rate year on year. And with this comes a responsibility to meet that challenge, and meet that challenge in a sustainable way. And we're proud as Vodafone in two regards here. Number one is that we have had more than 1,000% increase in data traffic in the last 5 years, yet our energy consumption in terms of gigawatt hours has stayed absolutely flat. So it's roughly a 90% increase in efficiency per unit of data that we carry. And we're with 3G going to 4G, going to in the future 5G, this is a trend that we need to maintain. And at the same time, there is also the fact that we run all of our European networks in a net zero way. Again, important part of what we commit to, but we all on renewable energy sources. But what I've learned in the months that I've now become this so-called energy expert, which is by no means the truth, but an energy amateur, if I put it in those terms, is that we can be fully renewable, but the reality is that there is a certain amount of supply of energy in the EU, and there's a certain amount of demand. And what the crisis with Russian, or the limitations on Russian gas has shown, is that we need to rapidly increase the use of renewable sources in the EU. And unlike gas or other sources of energy, you can't always predict when the sun will shine, although in pace in Europe it's quite predictable, or when the wind will blow. But as Paula well knows, in Brussels it's quite predictable when the wind will blow, but it doesn't always happen at a time that is most convenient. And so we need to deal with this volatility of supply and the increasing demands in a very sensible and digitalized way. And first and foremost, this starts first though with ourselves. So when we look to what we can offer as a company or as an industry, I think that the first thing is actually get our own house in order. And we are making significant efforts to limit our energy consumption, but there are certain things which we simply can't do. I'll give one concrete example. We have in Europe as Vodafone, we have over 100 million customers using, say, smartphones. Now, the user of a smartphone cannot discern whether a video is being sent through high definition or standard definition, yet because of certain regulatory requirements, all of that traffic is typically handed over, well, not all of it, but a vast majority in high definition. This adds a few percentage points to our energy consumption every year. It's something that we think that we should be allowed to have more flexibility on. So again, given that every single bit of electricity is going to matter going forward, let's not forget, we want to electrify the entire vehicle fleet in Europe. It's going to add 30%, give or take, to the amount of energy consumed or electricity consumed. We need to use every single gigawatt hour as best we can. So this is one area where we as an example, we want to see changes in policy to ensure that we can, within the law, reduce energy consumption without having any impact on our customers' behaviour. But then looking at what they then can offer to help others. The IoT, the Internet of Things, is obviously a big area where Vodafone contributes. I think Paula maybe not referred to it in name, but in spirit at least. We already have 20 million smart meters across Europe. By our calculations, typically energy consumption goes down by give or take 10% when a smart meter is used. And I think it differs from member state to member state whether the smart meter also is linked to flexible and dynamic pricing, and I think that's a really exciting area for digitalization, where customers are incentivized through technology, but also through pricing in the market to limit their consumption when demand is high and supply is low, and then use their their flexibility to then recharge devices, whatever it might be, when supply is high and demand is low. And that's a really interesting area of further development, and one where we are seeking to innovate. We have a new product called Digital Asset Broker. It's already we're experimenting with it in terms of smart vehicle charging, how to get cars to seamlessly charge and efficiently charge at charging points. But again, in my short-term amateur career in dealing with energy, what's one of the innovations that most struck me as being really exciting, and it's a little bit of a build on what Paula said about Estonia, where cars can charge at times where, again, the price is low or the demand is low. If you take that to one step further, which we're experimenting with Digital Asset Broker, we know that a car battery, depending on what car you have, if you're fortunate enough to have a Tesla, you might have a very big battery, you might have a smaller battery, but they can power a house for a couple of days, or maybe even 5 or 6 days if you have a really large car battery. So in a world of volatility of supply, where rivers don't always run as fast as we want them to, or where the sun sometimes goes behind clouds, having the ability to adapt how the house is being powered, going from the energy supply that we commonly use to actually a localized storage supply, is a very exciting development where we think there's huge potential with linking digitalization with the energy transition. And another area that we're also experimenting in, also in terms of managing the volatility of supply, is a trial that we're running in the UK at the moment with a couple of other companies, where we're seeking to use the combination of 5G technology. I won't bore people with the specifications of the technology, but there's an element of the technology called network slicing, which means you have a dedicated part of the network for a specific use, and with the real-time exchange of data, whereby we link up a number of energy substations, exchange data in real time, and allow locally produced renewable energy to be shifted between regional substations based on the exact parameters of supply and demand as they're occurring in real time. Again, it's a very exciting use of technology digitalization in combination with renewable sources to manage what we know will be a fundamental challenge for the industry or industries going forward, which is this case of supply volatility. But then here, I think, and I will wrap up with my last part, which is a reflection on, again, one of the themes that Paula referred to, which is this decentralization of the energy system. And I first heard about this concept many years ago at an event here in Brussels, and it's always struck me as fascinating to have how you move from centralized energy systems to where there's a lot of local production. And the theory was that telecoms would follow in the same path, and it never really has. And in fact, what I see here is a little bit of a concern, is how the energy market and the telecoms market, where the two, or the connectivity market, where, as I said at the beginning, these two need to go hand in hand and develop in the same way. We're actually going in opposite directions, or at least at risk of going in opposite directions at this point in time. So firstly, if you're just looking at the financials, we have parts of the energy sort of ecosystem, some of the producers of electricity, that have been making record profits in the last year. We know the reasons why, and at a time when the connectivity industry has a record level of indebtedness. And so the investment in the digital infrastructure to support the investment in the energy infrastructure, we're at a point now where we have a very diverging capability of these two sectors, and that should be of concern to everyone. And at the same time, more specifically, when we look at centralization versus decentralization, while much of the production that we need to drive a renewable energy system in Europe will take place at the edges of the market, so people's roofs, in the seas where we have wind turbines, wherever it might be, much less central generation of energy. If we don't get the economics right for the connectivity sector, we risk of having a centralization of digital infrastructure where we have 5G and advanced 5G capabilities in the city centers and maybe if we're lucky in the towns, but in the villages which will be closer to the generation of electricity, we'll have black spots where we don't have the advanced 5G. And that's where we need to ensure that from a European Commission and European institution perspective, there's a lot of joined up thinking in terms of ensuring that the energy transition, which will be as strong as the weakest link, doesn't slow down because the digital infrastructure is not there to support the energy transition, which is necessary. So we are absolutely excited about the capabilities and the possibilities that our technologies and the services which we can layer over and above our connectivity will provide, but we also go with a word of caution that this won't happen by itself, and one needs to be very careful about what are the economics of the sector as a whole, and make sure that we are able to support and delight customers and delight businesses day after day, which is ultimately what our ambition is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. I would say energy amateur is far too humble, but interesting points you raised, for instance, on smart meters, which, as you say, can really help to empower consumers and make them give them ownership of the energy transition, which is really what we need to not only make this clean energy, which is really something basic that we have to get right to make this clean energy transition not only sustainable but also just, and to get everybody on board. And then I would, before we go over to the discussion, I would first like to give still the word to Francisco Boshell from IRENA, who has worked on the topic of digitalization of energy systems extensively, and has written many reports about specific digital solutions such as Internet of Things, blockchain, artificial intelligence. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you to EPC for the invitation to contribute to this event. Also, thank you so much to Paula and Ben for your remarks. I think, as Ben said, I have nothing to really object from what you have said. On the contrary, I think that I have now very little to add to what you have said. I think has been very well explained, but very quickly to give you IRENA's view on digitalization for the energy transition. This first one, I think most of us, we already know that the future has to have a very significant component in the power system based on renewables. By the mid of the century, almost 100%, more than 90% renewables. But interesting is that even close to 80% should be what we call variable renewable energy. So photovoltaics and wind, which of course we know that pose new challenges to the power systems because of their variability. And this is linked to these three innovative trends that we see. One is more coming from the electricity demand side, which is the electrification trend, is to now electrify to the possible extent, every energy demand. A typical example is, of course, electric vehicles, where we replace internal combustion engines, but also we have heat pumps in industry applications, we have plasma, we have electric furnaces. So we see this trend that everything now is being tried to be electrified because it's more efficient, it's more clean, and it has a benefit, let's say, in general. But of course, it increased the complexity of power systems because now we have more power loads, different locations, different times, different peak demands, which brings more challenges to the power system. On the supply side, we have the decentralization trend, where we have not only big centralized power generation plants, but we have also now this modular small generation, even on top of the roofs of the dwellings, generation in small quantities and injecting back to the grid. That has many benefits, but also many challenges, because once again, now we have to deal with bidirectional flows of electrons. We have to also balance now small supplies and see what we do at every time these electrons, etc. So these trends on the supply and demand side are bringing also more complexity on how we operate and how we maintain and how we optimize power systems. And for that, then it's critical the digitalization, because now we have so much data and parameters that we need to optimize in real time that, of course, the traditional tools and methods to optimize power systems are not capable now to manage that. And therefore, this converting all this data into value, which is what we define as digitalization, converting data into value for the energy system is becoming crucial. Now, when we talk about digitalization, there are a myriad of technologies. We can talk about chatbots, we can talk about drones, robots, digital twins, etc. All of them very important. But I would like to focus on three concrete technologies that we consider crucial for integrating variable renewables in power systems. One is Internet of Things. So the first thing is that we are having data everywhere now. Every mobile phone, every refrigerator, every laundry machine can come now with a data collector and data transmitter. And we can use that through the Internet of Things network. So great, we can collect this huge amount of data. But now what do we do with all this data? Okay, now we need to make smart decisions in real time. And how to do that? Of course, humanly is very complicated. So we need this artificial intelligence to take this huge amount of data and make these decisions very quickly, very smart. Okay, great. Now we have data, we make decisions. But now the decisions have to end up also in transactions, monetary transactions, energy transactions. For example, Paula was mentioning that my laundry machine, for example, starts automatically at the time when the price of electricity is low, or I charge my electric vehicle. And that's a contract. That is not transfer of electrons only, it's transfer of euros as well. And we need to do these transactions in a fast and secure way. And that is where technologies like DLT, or including blockchain and other digital ledgers, are very useful, because they can do it in real time, very secure and automated with this smart contract. So, okay, we have these three great digital technologies: data, Internet of Things, decisions, artificial intelligence, transaction, blockchain. And there are already, of course, concrete applications for that. So we see how now, for example, on the generation side, we are improving the forecasting of wind and solar generation for electricity generation in almost real time, but also long term. We are using also artificial intelligence to better schedule the maintenance of distribution and transmission grids, transformers, switch breakers, etc. We are also improving the forecast for the demand side, better understanding the behavior of the consumers, and also using that to increase flexibility of what we call demand side management. So, and we are seeing now concrete applications in real life, let's say, of all of these. But we still have some challenges, of course, and I think Paula and Ben mentioned a few of them. One thing is that, for example, on the left side, talking about blockchain and smart contracts. So yes, they help to do transactions very quickly, automated, and in a secure way. But this will not replace anyway the need, let's say, for the human and regulatory intervention to resolve, for example, conflicts in a smart contract. Yeah. So anyway, at certain point, a smart contract is a normal contract anyway. So you will have some conflict where one of the parties, for example, is not complying to one of the requirements in the contract, and you will need a conflict resolution, or in other words, you will need a governance of those contracts. And the question is, who will govern these contracts and how this will be regulated? So this is still kind of an open question. On the right side, we have another application of digital technologies, dynamic tariff or time of use tariffs, also some people call. This is great, and as Paula mentioned, it's great to have my laundry machine, for example, connected, and then when they price is low, they start doing the laundry, etc. But the reality is that many countries have been implementing this dynamic pricing, but they are actually not really being applied by consumers. And why is that? This is a result of a survey with the national regulatory authorities of Europe. And the main reason is because the consumers are not aware of the benefits that this time of use tariffs bring. So they continue, they apply sometimes for this time of use schemes, but they continue doing the laundry at the same time because it's more convenient for them, for their schedules. They continue to turning on and off their meters, etc. Ben was mentioning about the smart meters. We have seen that we have super smart meter now, but used very dumbly. So basically, people use them just as a digital display to know, okay, how much I'm consuming now. But this is not really connected to a coherent optimization energy scheme. So still, it's not enough to have the smart technology. We need smart solutions. And for that, we need engagement of consumers, smart regulation, etc. I have some examples here, but I will skip this because Ben and Paula already mentioned there are many applications of artificial intelligence for day-ahead markets in electricity. This one already Paula and Ben mentioned the increase in consumption from data centers or also mining for blockchain. We did some analysis on this as well. And I think consistent with what Ben said, it's incredible to see how, for example, the increase in digital services increase in an order of magnitude in a decade, but the increase on energy consumption only increased a few percentage points. So it's amazing how efficient the ICT sector continues to be. And the other important aspect is that we see now that sometimes these data centers are not becoming the blockers for examples on how to use this energy in a smart way. They are, for example, providing flexibility services when they can to the grid. They are moving their servers to places with abundant renewable electricity because of their low cost. They are using, for example, waste heat from these data centers to be injected in district heating systems. So it's a great opportunity also to couple these data centers or this digital sector with the energy sector and harness benefits. So it's not really a problem. We can convert that also in part of the solution. And to finalize, a few challenges that we still see ahead. The first one is still to increase the performance of these digital services, for example, optimization of these digital ledger technologies, data centers, etc. The second one is that still regulators and others need to better understand the benefit that these digital technologies can create. And for that, this concept of regulatory sandboxes would be extremely useful, as already done in Australia, US, and here in the European Union as well. The third one is, of course, to continue to reduce power consumption from these ICT services, which is already been addressed by the major players. The fourth one is the need for infrastructure and standards. So yes, we can have a transfer, wireless transfer of gigabytes, but anyway, that has to be transferred in transmission of electrons in cables. So we still need more cables in the form of distribution grid, transmission grids that need to be operated and maintained by DSOs and TSOs. So we need to remember that. And the last point mentioned also by Paula and Ben is the issue about cybersecurity and data privacy. And the issue here is that without data, there is no digitalization, that's clear. But also how to reconcile that with the data privacy, data security, and make the case that consumers actually facilitate and agree to provide their data to create the business models. Because if there is no business model to create these apps that also Ben and Paula were mentioning, but we need the data from consumers there. But if consumers do not agree to provide this data, there is no business model for them. So how to reconcile the need for data, the security of the data, and the creation of these innovative business models. So still some work to be done there. Unfortunately, we don't have answers on many of those yet. So I'm very happy to actually be in this event because I'm actually learning for my colleague panelists. And yeah, keen to learn more about what is happening from the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this comprehensive outlook on digital solutions, the potential, but also the challenges that still need to be addressed. Then maybe I would first give maybe Paula a chance to react to these presentations and to, for instance, yeah, how these aspects are addressed in also in the action plan, for instance, on regulatory sandboxes. Is this something that is also considered in the action plan?
Thank you, Simon, and really fascinating, Francisco. I'm also learning from both of you, and I think it was very complementary in a way, though, what we presented and indicated. So first of all, well, really pleased to see the efforts in this case by Vodafone of increasing, well, the link that you made between the increase of the data flow, but still that you managed to keep flat the energy consumption. That is pretty incredible, I would say, and we are seeing this that the efficiency is really increasing, and I think that was so well illustrated by Francisco in his last slides. So how we are managing to decouple the consumption of ICT from a steady increase. So that's very good, even though we can still go further. And as said, that's what we're also addressing, for instance, in the Energy Efficiency Directive, which is now being revised and is being negotiated in the Parliament, in the Council, and we're looking at efficiency of data centers, notably. And then both Ben and Francisco mentioned the dynamic pricing. And indeed, one thing is having the possibility, the other is making use of it, right? And I would encourage you all to look into the ongoing consultation, a very popular and long-awaited consultation on the electricity market design, and where we do have some questions precisely related to the potential of digitalization, now also in the review of the electricity market design, pointing also precisely to these types of instruments, such as the dynamic pricing and how it can be made best use of it. It just reminded me, the other day I was discussing with a friend and telling her about these possibilities, and she was really intrigued and say, what? I didn't know that this exists. I also wanted to be able to have that. And that, I think, illustrates that indeed the fact that it exists doesn't mean that that you actually use it. And I think you've also reflected this very much. So I had already mentioned, on the one hand, we need the technology. We need then the regulatory framework which enables that technology. We need the investments, but we do also need the consumer behavior that goes along with it. So we really need a whole governance, because I liked the slogan, smart technology does not really necessarily mean smart use of the technology, neither does it mean awareness about the technology. So these are different streams on which we need to work in parallel to really ensure that we can seize all the potential it brings. And then on your last point, Simon, on the regulatory sandboxes, yes, this is something that we are looking into in the context of the digitalization of the Energy Action Plan, and also more widely, in order indeed to facilitate and not be in any way a break to the innovation which is still very much possible and taking place in this sector. So I would leave it at this as a reaction, and so as to give possibility now for questions and discussion.
Yes, before opening the floor for questions from the audience, maybe another question would that I had a question from myself that I have for you would be how can we actually ensure that consumers use these smart technologies in a smart way, and how is this also how can we provide them with the necessary digital skills and also ensure that we don't create a digital divide doing so?
Are you addressing this to me in particular or to all of us?
Yes, but of course, first to you, and then I see then
Okay.
the other speakers can react, of course. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for the question. Indeed. So we're trying to really, as said, as part of the work streams on which to work and to develop, we're trying to really to make sure we work very much on information awareness raising of consumers in different ways, and in order to do that, we also need to create again the framework. So the trust, build the confidence, the trust for consumers to trust that they can share their data, that there will be use but no abuse of their data. And so this needs to really be built. You need to build this trust. For that you need also some regulation in order to make sure that that one knows who owns the data, how what type of use can be made of it. When do I, as a citizen, remain always in charge of my data? So all of this needs its dedicated framework, so that indeed at the end we can reassure the citizens, the consumers, that they can trust the same way that now there's I would say trust in making an online transfer or an online payment. You need to build this trust with the accompanying regulatory framework, but also with the accompanying communication about the safeguards that are in place.
Yeah, then maybe Francisco, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. No, I think Paula explained very well. Maybe two additional thoughts there. Two options that I also see is one, of course, very tailored awareness campaigns with consumers, which require a lot of work also from the retailers to really explain to the consumers what are the benefits, and also have them involved in real time on this. So that's one option. But yeah, that's a little bit complicated. Sometimes consumers are not really so much interested about saving a few euros per year their electricity bill. Now with the current in Europe, with the current increase in electricity prices, that might be different, and consumers might be more sensitive to this. The other option I see is involving a third party, which can create a new business model, like a type of ESCO or virtual power plant, where basically they just offer package to the consumer, no, saying, look, with this you will save more or less X percentage. That's it. That's all you need to know, and the rest leave it to me. And then they are the ones who really use these savings in, for example, creating a virtual power plant scheme, or getting the savings from the mayor to the retailer, etc. So this creation of new business models through a third party. So maybe these are two alternatives on how to get a better and more effective engagement and reaction from the end user.
And then Ben, yeah, I would be curious to hear if you can share your reflections on the smart use of technologies and what is Vodafone also doing on this.
Well, yeah, if I can respond sort of firstly pulling out a couple of the words which I heard, which I think are really important words, and then sort of a parallel example, which I think will be an important one to bear in mind when thinking about the use of sort of data in the energy and electricity context. So firstly, one of the words I heard was trust, and I think is absolutely critical that as we move into greater use of data to support smart energy systems, both supply and demand side, that this is done with a fully trusted environment. And so, and in that sense, I think there is a parallel with the online advertising market, which is subject to a huge debate at the moment. We know there are two extremes in the online advertising market. You know, on the one hand, you have online advertising, which is totally blind to this person that is being targeted with the advert. So I myself might receive an advert on something which I'm just totally not interested in. I just move on. It's something which is more of a nuisance than anything which is enhancing to my online experience. And at the other extreme, I might receive an advert or advertisement based on, you know, a private conversation I've had where someone has listened in on my phone. You know, we know all of these scare stories, whether they're true or not, I'm not here to comment on, but we know that there are extreme versions of privacy invasion, which can, if they're done right, though, and absolutely target people with advertising that is most relevant to what they're interested in, what they care about, and what they might or might not, or in this case, might be wanting to purchase. And where I think we need to get to in online advertising, it is a middle of the road approach. We don't want to have these extreme versions of privacy invasion. On the other hand, we do want to have an amount of intelligence in the system to enhance people's online experience. And I think the same will be true in terms of using smart data in the energy context. You know, I don't really want someone to analyze what goes on in my household to a very high degree of detail. I don't want them to know if I'm watching television on a certain size television downstairs, which might have a certain energy consumption, and then with great algorithms and intelligence, I know, you know, at approximately 10:25 in the evening, I'm likely to go upstairs and move to a slightly smaller television screen, or move on to a different device, or might take a shower, whatever it might be. This is a level of knowledge which is capable of being over time amalgamated and processed, and which would enhance the efficiency of the energy system, create a huge amount of predictability on demand, but which in my mind goes beyond what would be acceptable from a privacy point of view. And on the other hand, we don't want to say, well, just ignore all the data and stop any data being used, because then we'll have a completely dumb energy system. So it's finding that middle of the road, which is something that we are, as a company, also trying to find that middle of the road on the online advertising space. We think the same will be true in terms of the use of personal data, or anonymized or pseudonymized data, whatever it might be, to ensure that we get the right balance between energy efficiency, technological development, but also the protection of people's privacies. And that's where obviously the institutions and the policymakers need to play their role, ensuring that we know, with a certain amount of experimentation, we do navigate these difficult trade-offs, but do get to a point which is, in the end, welfare enhancing for all of our civilians.
Thank you very much. I think a very interesting point, really a crucial component to build this trust in digital technologies of consumers will be addressing their privacy concerns, because, as you say, these smart technologies in our homes, such as smart fridges and so on, they can give energy companies and other companies very intrusive view of our personal lives. So I think this is indeed will be very important to address. And then I would also ask Paula how this is how the action plan is specifically also addressing this.
Yes, on this, as said, we're in the process of creating the data space, right? And in the doing so, precisely in defining, and that's why I mentioned and referred to what is accompanying, which it goes in parallel, which is really all the framework in terms of data protection, ownership of data, and under which condition can data be transferred, used, what are the limits. So this is a dedicated or an enabler, which is not directly linked with the digitalization as such, but which is an enabler for such digitalization to take place. So as such, not taken up directly by the digitalization of the Energy Action Plan, but this is accompanying in order to make sure that indeed, when such data space is created, that there can be full trust in by all users, that it respects the boundaries, and there is a balance between the benefits I can take from sharing some of data which belong to me, and what are the returns that I can get from that.
Thank you. Maybe any questions from the audience? If you can put your hand up, and then we can unmute you, and you can address your question directly to one or more of the speakers.
it seems like we've spoken with such clarity that there are no questions that have been generated, and everything is crystal clear.
The topics have been covered too comprehensively, I think, yes. We have a question. I can't see.
Yes, hello. Melanie Fessler, policy analyst at EPC, colleague of Simon. Thank you very much to all of you for your really comprehensive overviews. So this is just a follow-up question. Maybe you could further develop on how can digitalization be an enabler for, as you mentioned, a decentralized energy system where citizens as prosumers and renewable energy communities play an important role. Thanks.
If I go just to build on what we've already said, I mean, for us, it's the future of not just, as we have in Europe, hundreds of millions of connected devices today, but it's the future of billions of connected devices sharing data in an acceptable way in real time to make the energy grid more efficient. That is our vision for the future, and it's the more you decentralize, the more potential there is to have localized storage, which is a resource which we need to tap into, which we haven't tapped into yet. I mean, now if I go really long term, I mean, I'm connecting to this wonderful event through a laptop which has its own battery. I have next to me a smartphone which has its own battery. We have a plethora. We will have a plethora of connected devices and a plethora of devices with energy storage capability. A future of a really smart digitalized energy system might see all of those batteries being resourced together to create when we have in our vision of the future of our networks, we have this vision of there being a supercomputer where all of our networks in Europe come together with huge amounts of processing capability to create a giant European supercomputer. It's the same in terms of the devices that will connect. It can become this super European battery. And this will be, this can be a really interesting enhancement to Europe's energy stability, Europe's energy sovereignty, and indeed Europe's energy sustainability. So without going over all of the, some of the things we've already talked about on the panel, I just build on that saying that it is about what's connected, how much connectivity there is, and then imagining the potential for combining production, but also storage to have a very different looking energy grid and grid of grids, I would imagine, in the future.
Yeah, Paula, I don't know if you want to comment since you are unmuted.
Yes, well, I would say we really need to put a lot of efforts, and there I count also on the industry, on the international organizations, on the local level, to really illustrate with very concrete examples what are the benefits of digitalization for the end consumer, for the citizens. And we have plenty of those, and really need to share them. We need to make our share in terms of raising awareness and thinking, for instance, of an ongoing Dutch pilot project, which is interconnecting a neighborhood of 46 households and allowing all these households to engage in peer-to-peer residential energy sharing, while at the same time helping the distribution system operator to avoid congestion. So this will be telling less to the citizen in terms of what do they care about the congestion of the distribution system operator, but the fact that they will be able to benefit from a joint production of electricity and share it, and the benefits it brings in terms of notably in terms of the energy bills is important to make. So we'll have to really not spare efforts in giving very concrete examples of what is it that the digitalization brings, and very concrete examples of what's in there for each citizen.
Yes, Francisco.
Thanks, Simon. So yeah, maybe another example on how this digitalization is already benefiting the energy system is there are many examples now how digitalization is used to have a smart charging of electric vehicles. And a concrete case is the city of Hamburg. They did the analysis on what would it take to the distribution system operator to upgrade their grid to integrate around 60,000 electric vehicles in the next 3 years. And basically, they would need in the next 5 years or 4 years to invest with uncontrolled charging, invest around 20 million euros in changing distribution with cables, transformers, and switch breakers. And the issue is not only the investment, it's also that they would need basically to open the streets to install underground cables, close the roads for citizens for several weeks, interrupt electricity flows for hours for their consumers. So it's a complete hassle. But if they do it in a smart way with a smart control, digital control of the residential charging points, it would cost around 2 million euros to install all the hardware that would be required for that, and basically could be done in a few months. Yeah, and this is just one of many examples around the globe on how digitalization is really, as Paula said, and Ben as well, it's not really anymore a question of course how much we invest in digital or not. Is that smart is the only way for the energy transition. If we don't go smart, it's impossible. We will never succeed. We will not have the time. We will not have the money to do what we need to do in the next 5 years. We saw the Repower EU now, the response to the crisis. It's all about accelerating. We need to do it now, and digitalization can help us to do it faster. I really don't see any other way we can go about it.
Thank you. Question I see in the chat to Paula is so transmission system operators and distribution system operators have been tasked under the action plan to build a digital twin of the European electricity grid. So what the question is, could you elaborate on what the Commission's expectations are for this project and what the timeline is for delivery?
Yes, thank you for the question. So in fact, the first thing was to resurrect in a way the Smart Energy Task Force that we had. And it's been seen with very good feedback. And this task force will be tasked with really preparing the necessary tools, also regulatory tools to enable digitalization, notably when it comes to data exchange, interoperability, data exchange between the TSOs and the DSOs. So that will be one of the first deliverables, which is already being discussed, is an implementing act on the interoperability of the data. So really crucial. And then there will be 2 other acts to come, which actually are already foreseen in the existing electricity directive. So this is a legislation that we owe on the basis of an existing legal framework. So I mentioned the first one, and then there was another one on demand response and flexibility. Again, extremely important. So the idea is really to bring together the communities concerned, and it will have the DSOs, the new EU DSO represented, the TSOs also at EU level represented, the member states, and really have a very concrete input in terms of what are the challenges and how can we feed that into the necessary legislation.
Thank you. And maybe building on this, of course, Vodafone is also owns a huge network infrastructure. Is Vodafone also using these technologies of digital twins? And could you maybe tell me a bit more, Ben, about the opportunities that have arisen from the use of digital twins, and also the challenges that you've seen from your perspective?
I'm going to have to plead ignorance here. I'll go back to what I said at the beginning about being the amateur in this space. I know we are using digital twins in a number of fields to enhance efficiency and sort of predictability of outcomes, but it's not something that I have great awareness of. So I don't want to mislead people with incorrect information, I'm afraid.
Of course, no problem. Maybe Francisco, how do you assess the potential of these technologies, digital twins, for improving the operation of electricity networks?
Yeah, I think that, of course, this will be very useful because it will allow to have a close as real as possible dry test of all the different options. You will not need to do any physical investments in infrastructure. You can just digitally simulate all the different options you may have on different type of even technology, different type of cables, transformers, approaches, and then have drive runs on all of that, and really find on a virtual world what would be the best option, and then cross our fingers that real life would follow the same. So I think that's very useful. I have seen already the use in other applications like asset management. So it's very useful for operation and maintenance of, for example, big wind turbines, etc., where you basically create a digital twin of a machine, and then you can also experiment different type of spare parts that you can use to replace them, and that also saves money and time, because then application like offshore wind, you can imagine that doing maintenance in a wind turbine in the middle of the ocean, you can only do it a few times per year when the weather window allows you. So when you go, you have to be sure that what you are going to do will work. So I see a lot of benefits. I mean, all the technologies are very useful. Drones, robots for cleaning PV panels. So there is, as I said at the beginning, there is a myriad of digital technologies. I think we are just scratching the surface on all the benefits and applications that we can have for the energy sector with digital technologies.
Thank you. So we've discussed these all these different technologies and challenges, but what would now be the priority, or the what we should address first? Is this first cybersecurity? Is this an energy data space? Is it the digital skills for consumers and building trust in digital technologies, or regulatory reforms, or what should really be what is really the priority, or really the precondition for this making this twin green and digital transition of the energy sector in Europe happen? Maybe Paula, if you could address that first, from the things that you've seen in the action plan, what really do you think is the most immediate priority, or the absolute necessary
clearly the data space and how to go about it. So you need to be able to gather this data and make good use of it, right? Because it's really, and as Francisco said, turn the data into value. I like that one too. It's really data per se is not of big use if we cannot really interpret it, use it in the best possible way. So that's the one of the first deliveries. But of course, it does depend on the other pillars that I mentioned: the investments, the trust. But I'd say yes, if I'd have to put a ranking in this is really one where we are working as we speak. And then also the implementing legislation, which is already foreseen in the existing electricity directive. And I mentioned already the example of the implementing regulations for the access to data, on demand response, on consumer, on the switching, and on the energy sharing. So these are imminent deliverables on which we are already working in the context also of this of the successor of the smart grids task force.
Thank you. I don't know if Francisco or Ben also have, what do you think are the most immediate priorities, really?
Well, I think the important thing here is not to say there's a single priority which is the most pressing. I think we're talking about a jigsaw puzzle here where all the pieces need to come together in a seamless way. And if we don't get the enhancement of supply right, then we can have very smart systems, but we'll have a smart system where people are competing for a resource which remains scarce. And if we have lots of abundant supply, but we don't have smart demand, then we won't be making the most of our renewable resources. And if we don't have the underlying infrastructure, then we can have all of our ambitions about a smart and decentralized digital grid, but it will be frustrated by the shortcomings in terms of the underpinning infrastructure. So I think we need to think of this as a one big piece where it needs to all come together in a very cohesive manner. And but I'll just, because it's so timely, I mean, I'm very struck by what Executive Vice President Wreschner has just been quoted saying today in terms of looking at, you know, the sector obviously just closest to us at Vodafone, the connectivity sector, where she's highlighted today that this is the over fragmentation of this sector. It is not what Europe needs, and we need to go to, contrary to what I said earlier, a more centralized European telecom space. But she doesn't mean that in terms of centralizing the actual availability of the technology, but centralized in terms of reducing the fragmentation and ensuring that we have a smaller number of groups that are able to compete across the whole of Europe. And if we're at a phase now of innovation, experimentation, it is important to have, you know, scaled operators across the EU that are able to innovate using their capabilities and roll these technologies out in partnership with others at pace. And this doesn't happen in a fragmented market. So I think that direction is absolutely the right direction, and one which is really important that we get this innovation and then this rollout at pace, because otherwise we'll be, I'm afraid, here in 5 years' time talking about the barriers to this, and I don't want to be there.
Maybe also related to this in a way, it was something that you raised during your presentation, was that you said something about the telecom sector and the energy sector going in opposite directions. So of course, yeah, the energy sector is reining in huge windfall profits as a consequence of the energy crisis. And I was just wondering what do you see as the core problem here, and how would you want to address it?
For me, the core problem is hyper competition. I mean, there has been a conscious policy choices in Europe in the last, say, 10 years of effectively artificially lowering the barriers to entry to our sector and artificially raising the barriers to exit. And what happens is you come in, there's huge exploitation of the value of sunk assets. There's a massive extraction of value through excessive spectrum fees, and there's an inability for the market to correct itself to an efficient market structure because of the application of merger policy. And you put all these things together, you create a perfect storm, which we are now in, whereby the investment gap in terms of Europe's needs as set up with the digital decade targets is not going to be met by the investment capacity of the industry. And the investment gap was already significant in the tens of billions of euros per year. That's before we had the energy crisis, where the whole industry is facing much higher energy costs. It was before we saw a 2.5% rise in interest rates in the euro area, which of course, as an industry, we're massively indebted, as I said at the beginning, and massive level of debt combined with higher interest rates longer term. Some of those debts at the moment are set at a lower rate, but once that's renewed, if interest rates have gone up, that's going to again extract the investment capacity of the industry. So are we going to close that investment gap? No, I think we're moving in the wrong direction, and therefore something fundamental needs to change. And I think EVP Wreschner was right in saying that we now need to have this consolidation and centralization of telecoms capacity to correct where we are in terms of the investment gap, but also linked to what we've said today, to enhance the capabilities of the sector. Cybersecurity, we're just scratching at the surface of some of the risks that we're seeing, and an industry that is earning below its cost of capital simply cannot invest in the cyber capabilities that we need to protect our critical infrastructure. So again, there needs to be a whole of Europe, whole of industry, whole of economy approach to looking at our sector, which is an enabler of all other sectors, and ensuring that the financial health is remedied, such that we can invest in confidence and give Europe the infrastructure it needs.
Thank you. Another question I still wanted to raise, since you raised it yourself, Paula, was for the electricity market reform. Of course, digital technologies, building trust in digital technologies is just one of the challenges that we need to do. But another one is addressing regulatory barriers, for instance, for peer-to-peer energy trading between consumers. And of course, it was already partially addressed in the clean energy package, but I'm wondering, is this also a big component of the upcoming proposal on the electricity market reform that the Commission is preparing?
Well, the exact content and scope will be defined by the feedback in this consultation. That's why my plea to all interested parties to really look into this consultation, and there's no need to reply to all of it. Of course, different chapters may interest different stakeholders, but indeed on the peer-to-peer, this is something that we also want to explore. So we have questions in this regard on how best to seize the potential of digitalization already now, also now in the review of the electricity market design. So you will find some questions in this sense.
Yeah, maybe Francisco, I think you've also worked on this quite a bit. What have you seen in your work are the biggest regulatory barriers to really enable peer-to-peer electricity trading and or energy trading, which can be a really, of course, also a big component of empowering consumers in the clean energy transition, and can of course also be enabled a lot by digital solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one of the challenges we have seen is clarity on the role of the different actors involved. So one thing is, of course, to have two individuals, let's say, trading electricity from a surplus of, for example, solar PV that they have from their PV panel on the rooftop, digitally through an app. But again, the point is that those transactions should end also in electrons moving through some cables. And those cables should be operated and maintained by someone who has the expertise to do it, usually the distribution system operator. So how to compensate the distribution system operator in such schemes and not let them aside of that kind of business models, no? I think this is somehow being already addressed in the context of the European Union, but there is, let's say, there's still a little bit of issues on how to compensate the different actors. At the end, the market works very simply. So the ones who add value to the system are compensated. The ones that bring constraints to the system are penalized. But you have to look into the whole picture. So all the different actors. So I think that's something that digitalization is changing a bit, and then we need a bit more clarity on that. For that, I think again that, for example, the concept of regulatory sandboxes are useful to have tests at the scale, as well as more clarity on, I use the word governance because I don't find other better term, but governance of data is also important. I think that for the rest, ICT technologies and energy technology, especially ICT technology companies, are very dynamic, smart. They will come with solutions, but they need the enabling environment, let's say, to actually have that. And I think regulatory clarity and clear on governance could be quite useful.
Thank you. Yes, since we've almost arrived at the end of the discussion, I would maybe just give every speaker his chance to give his view on what is the main takeaway of today's discussion, or just your general outlook on this topic. Ben, could you start?
Sure, happy to do so. Look, firstly, thank you for convening this so expertly. It's been a really interesting discussion. I hope the people listening have found it equally interesting. For me, look, my takeaways are reinforcing effectively what I came into this session thinking, which is there's huge opportunity ahead of us. We are in a crisis, and in a crisis, often it creates the need to innovate, the need to experiment, the need to find solutions to problems that we identify, and hopefully we can use this to become a more sustainable energy continent. And it's great that the energy transition, the digital transition are so widely understood to go hand in hand. And we know we have a role to play. We look forward to playing the role to the fullest extent that we can. And we look forward to working with all companies, institutions that can help us along the way and get to the end goal, which is a fully sustainable, highly intelligent European energy and digital grid system. And yeah, we're here to do what we can.
Thank you. Francisco, any concluding reflections from your part?
Well, again, thank you so much for inviting Irina to share our views on this topic. I think I will just again reiterate what I mentioned before. For the scale and the speed that we need for this energy transition, smart is the only way to go. I don't see any way, and digitalization plays a key role. Digitalization is not of course, the ultimate goal, but it's the enabler that can help. And all this technology that we mentioned today very briefly, I think again that we are just starting to scratch the surface of the potential that they have to really optimize and benefit the energy sector. So we need to continue to test them, learn from the experience, share experiences, improving, etc., to really make the best out of it in the few years to come.
Thank you. And then Paula.
Well, thank you also, and what a pleasure with the three of you and the public and the good questions. Well, I'd say no decarbonization without digitalization, and in order to really achieve this, we have to pursue work in parallel on different streams, on the technology itself, where innovation is very, very much welcome, and there's still a lot of potential to be seized, on the regulatory framework, on the necessary investments, but also, last but definitely not least, the consumer behavior in order to really allow for the acceptance by the consumers. And the good news is, I think we are all in the same boat. Policymakers, industry, researchers, and all have a contribution to make. It's major. It's a twin transition, and definitely cannot be achieved alone by anyone.
Thank you very much. So that brings an end to our discussion today. And then I would like to thank all the speakers for taking their time to be here with us today. Also, the participants for their insightful questions. And of course, also the Vodafone Institute, our partner, which has made this project and this event possible. I would then encourage you to also take a look at our website and look at the paper that we have written as part of this project, which discusses all of the topics that we have discussed here today. And then I hope to see you again at our future events on climate and energy. Thank you very much for joining us today.